definitely strong. How that feel?
Spirit is strong, definitely strong.
So we got brother Tony Browder. We've been doing like this is about the fifth movie critique that we've done, maybe about fifth or sixth one that we've done. We talked about the Django, but I heard him on the radio today, and he's going to do some awesome things. I mean, he's been breaking down the Avatar to Lion King. This is going to be a phenomenal presentation here today. So let's put your hands together for author, scholar, Tony Browder. Give him a big round of applause.
All right, good. All right, thank you so much, Brother Jabari. Thank you for holding it down. Thank you for making it possible for us to continue to have these programs here in Baltimore and bring information and enlightenment to our people. So, as always, it's my pleasure to be here and to always be in a place where knowledge and information is appreciated. That's one of the reasons why I do appreciate coming to Baltimore on a regular basis, and working with Jabari gives me an opportunity to stretch out and talk about some issues, some topics, some things that I may not normally talk about as I travel around the country. So I guarantee you, you will be in for a treat and will be pleasantly enlightened and hopefully entertained as well. So let me just jump right into it. It's not my intent this evening to jump into the debate as to whether or not Django Unchained is an insult to my ancestors, as some say, or how accurately it did or did not portray slavery, or the issue as to whether or not Quentin Tarantino excessively used that word. You all know what word I'm talking about, right? All right? That's not why I'm here. I'm here instead to talk about the nature of Hollywood films, and especially what I want to do is to decode Django Unchained and discuss the need for people, especially people of African descent, to become critical consumers of media content. So I want to talk about the physiological and psychological effects of films, the effects of films on the people who watch them. And I also want to focus on what it is that we have to take away from movies, especially what the takeaway should be for a film like Django Unchained. So let's be clear about one thing, and one thing first and foremost, that Hollywood is all about business. You all have heard the statement, there's no business like what?
Show business.
Show business, right. And show business is 5% show and 95% business. It's all about the bottom line. It's all about the box office. So the issue is, if you're looking for Hollywood to tell you your story or to teach you your history, you're going to be sadly mistaken, especially if you're looking for them to teach you black history. That ain't going to happen. So it's foolish for you to even think that or get mad at them because they don't do what it is that they're not going to do anyway. So we got to be clear about who they are and what it is they do. Hollywood's market is primarily white males between the ages of 17 and 45. That's their target audience. This age group is the greatest fans of Quentin Tarantino. They love his twisted mind. They love the almost cartoon-like violence that he gives them in every single one of his films. So let me look at why I'm talking about Django Unchained, because most of you all know me as a historian, as a researcher, as an Egyptologist. I've been doing this for over 30 years, but my formal training, what I have my degree in, is in graphic design and advertising. I'm an artist by profession, by training, by formal training. And one of the best jobs I ever had in my life was a job during the summer of 1972 when I was working as an intern at Foot Cone & Belding, which is a large advertising agency in downtown Chicago. It was there in that place where I worked with artists, I worked with art directors, I worked with photographers, writers, and I had an opportunity to see the whole advertising industry from the inside out. You know, we worked on a number of advertising campaigns, and it gave me an appreciation for what goes into producing an ad, whether it's a television ad, a radio ad, or a print ad. Groups of people who don't look like the folk who's sitting in this room sit down and determine everything that makes up every single ad that you see. And the whole idea is to create a sound, to create an image, to create a feeling that you will be able to relate to in order to separate you from your money. The whole idea behind advertising is to get you to spend money that you don't have oftentimes with people that you don't even like. And you do it because you've been programmed to do it. That's what advertising is all about. And so on this wonderful job that I had, this wonderful summer job that I had, whenever things were slow, I would go into the viewing room and literally watch commercials all day long. Had a nice little studio with about 50 seats, and I would just watch commercials all day long and study every aspect of the commercial, the writing, the music, the acting, the direction. So it taught me how to appreciate what goes into creating the finished product. So it also made me aware of the fact that people are working on these things months and sometimes even years, developing ad campaigns before the public even sees it. So these folk who are involved in this process have a very good idea of what people are going to be responding to, so they are ahead of the curve. And there's a segment of the population in every single society that functions this way. They produce the ideas and the concepts that everybody responds to. They pull the strings and people jump. That's what this game is all about. And so this whole experience has taught me to be detail-oriented. And it's helped to increase my love for films because I have a better understanding of how they are made and what goes into the creation of films. So when I critique a film, I'm looking at it from multiple perspectives. I'm looking at it from a historical perspective as well as a technical perspective. So from a technical perspective, I'm evaluating the writing. I'm evaluating the art direction, the direction itself, the acting, the editing, the music. All of these things go into producing any film that we see. And if you watch a film, and I always love watching the credits at the end of the film, I want to know who the people are who invested their time and energy, the artisans, the craft persons who produced this. So, there may be 2 or 3 dozen actors in a film, and you'll see their names go up in the credits. But then you'll see maybe 2 or 3 minutes of people who were involved in producing this film, who worked behind the scenes, people whose faces you will never see, but they're responsible for making this film a reality. So when you look at things from that perspective, you get a totally different view of what's on the scene, what's on the screen, because they make it happen. And so as a researcher, I'm beginning to explore new avenues of research. And a brand new field of research that has captivated my interest is newly developing brain research, cutting-edge information about neuroplasticity and mirror neurons. Now, what am I talking about? Neurologists, people who study the brain, are beginning to understand that this thing that we have between our ears, the brain, is designed in such a way that it responds to information that it is exposed to. It is exposed to information that comes in through your eyes, information that you see. It responds to information that comes in to your ear. So whatever comes into your mind shapes your mind. And there are these things called mirror neurons. When you see something, it causes your body to naturally want to replicate what you see. So in other words, what you see is who you become. What you see is who you become. So if you see a certain type of film, certain types of characters, then that begins to reprogram your mind and you begin to talk like that character. You begin to think and move and act like that character because the mirror neurons, or this thing called neuroplasticity, shapes your mind in the image of what it is that you see. That's how every human being functions. And so whoever controls the information that comes into your brain, they become your master, whether you are conscious of it or not. They're the ones who are literally pulling the strings. So again, to reiterate this very basic and fundamental fact, everything that you see, everything that comes into your eyes is programmed in your mind, is programming your mind. Everything that comes into your ear, every music that you listen to, the music videos that you watch are affecting you on multiple levels, and what you see, you imitate because of these mirror neurons, because of this concept of neuroplasticity. What you see becomes your reality. And so the whole idea is, if you understand this reality, then it means if you're conscious about who you are, if you're conscious about what's going on, then it means that you don't necessarily want someone else to be your master. You don't want somebody else to pull your strings. If nothing else, you want to be the master of your fate. You want to determine what you think and how you think, what you do and why you do it. So that means that you've got to begin to assume responsibility and control over what comes in your mind. You literally have to begin to develop discriminating tastes and understand very clearly that not everything that you see is good for you. Not everything that you hear is good for you. And if you care about yourself, then you will begin to be more guarded about what comes into your mind because it shapes your reality. So, again, the reality that we have to deal with is understanding this very basic and fundamental truth. We need to begin to take ownership for what it is that we expose ourselves to. So I want you all to understand Django Unchained from this perspective. Because the whole idea is for you to free yourselves, free your mind, and become the master of your fate. So in preparation for this critique and decoding Django Unchained, I made it a point to go to the theater, and I saw the film twice. I saw it opening day on Christmas, and then I saw it several weeks later. And the whole reason why I like to go to the theater is to really clock the people, to clock the audience, especially if I've seen the film already, so I know what's coming up. I clock the audience to see if they're laughing at the scenes that are funny, see how they respond to the things that shock them. So that tells me how well the actor or the writer or the director or the editor did their job. So what I took away from watching Django Unchained in the theater twice, I noticed three basic reactions. I noticed that older African Americans reacted one way to the film. Older white Americans acted another way to the film. And young black folk and young white folk acted the same way. Okay? So I can best sum up the youth response to Django Unchained by sharing with you comments that my 20-year-old cousin shared with me when he saw the film. I was talking to him in January, and he said, "Cousin Tony, I saw Django, but I felt bad because I was laughing at scenes that I knew I shouldn't have been laughing at." So that statement, my cousin's confession, told me two things. Number one, it told me that he had sense enough to know that he was laughing at something that he shouldn't have been laughing at, something that he knew was wrong. And the second point is that it validated for me that this young man, this bright young man, had never been exposed to his history, the history of African people in America. Most people living in this country don't know anything at all about the history of the enslavement of African people in this country, what they were subjected to, how they fought and overcame obstacles. Most people don't know. And as a consequence, they think slavery happened a long time ago and don't realize how it's still manifesting itself today in just a different form. But because you don't have that knowledge, then it doesn't mean anything to you. And things that should shock you and horrify you are funny. But a person in their right mind, a person in their conscious mind, knows better than to laugh at something that they know caused pain to their family members, to their ancestors. So to further my research on this film for the presentations that I've done on Django, and this is the fourth time that I've done this presentation. So every time I do a presentation, I'm always tweaking it, I'm always adjusting it. So to further my research, I went down on the corner and got a copy of the DVD from Blackbusters, right? So y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Y'all know what I'm talking about. That's the only reason I go to the barbershop. So I did that so that I could watch the film in the privacy of my own home, and I could screen it. I could go back and play certain images over and over again. I could listen for the dialogue. I can clock things that I couldn't clock in the theater. So it helped me begin to dig deeper into my research about this film. One of the other things that I did, and that I would suggest that you all do as well, is that I went online and I downloaded a copy of the script. Script is available for free. So, as is usually the case with the script to a film, the script differs substantially from the final product. The director puts all of their ideas in this script, and they use that to get financing for the film. But when they began to start shooting the film, circumstances forced them to make changes in the script. And sometimes they make changes in the script on a daily basis. Case in point, how many of you all saw the movie Django? Right. So Christoph Waltz, the character, the guy who played Dr. Schultz, as he was training for the film, because the actors had to go through training for several months to get them prepared to ride horses and shoot guns and all these things. Well, as Christoph Waltz was doing his training to learn to ride a horse, about the second or third day of his training, he fell off the horse and broke his hip. And he was laid up in the hospital for about 2 months. And then after he came out the hospital, he couldn't ride a horse for a while. And so since they already had a shooting schedule and a budget, what Quentin Tarantino did was to rewrite the script so that the early scenes of the movie, he showed Dr. Schultz in that wagon with the tooth. So that was something that he added after the fact because of circumstances that happened while they were preparing to shoot the film. So these are things you got to deal with. These are things that writers and directors and people involved in this industry have to deal with. So it's not a static thing. It's constantly changing, and it requires that you think on your feet and that you constantly adjust to new circumstances that come your way. So when I read the script, I began to realize how different the movie was from the actual script itself. And then I began to realize, in reflecting on the movie, that there were certain key scenes in the script that were not in the film. They were not in the film because had Quentin Tarantino added all of this content in the film would probably be about 3.5 hours long. So he had to cut some scenes because at one point, Harvey Weinstein, the producer of the film, had really wanted him to make a 2-part movie, like he did Kill Bill Part 1 and Part 2. But he said, no, he didn't want to do that. So he decided to edit the film out, and he strategically edited out certain scenes that would make the movie shorter, but make it flow better. And I'm hopeful that maybe sometime before the end of the year, he'll come out with the director's cut of the movie and have all of those deleted scenes in them so that you get the full Django effect. So reading the script really confirms how good of a writer Quentin Tarantino is. I mean, he is a really good writer. And there's a wonderful article on him in the May issue of Vanity Fair. It talks about the 20-year anniversary of Pulp Fiction and what he went through to write that film. And the woman who typed the script, he wrote Pulp Fiction in 12 notebooks. And she typed the script. And she said in typing the script that Quentin Tarantino basically is functionally illiterate. She said that as she was typing the script, he had, on average, 900 grammatical errors on each page. But he's extremely creative, very talented, knows the movie industry inside and out. So his creativity compensates for his being illiterate. Right? Just calling it like it is. But that movie, Pulp Fiction, literally put him on the map, made him a force to be reckoned with. And so one of the things that I saw from the script is just how subversive Quentin Tarantino is. Quentin Tarantino, in his subversiveness, is not unlike James Cameron, the writer and the director of Avatar. Both of these films have a similar storyline in that both of these stories are stories about how evil and corrupt some white men are and the disdain that these white men have for people of color. Both films offer a glimpse into the humanity of oppressed people of color. In Django, it was black people. In Avatar, it was blue people. But you saw oppressed people who were being oppressed by a common enemy, white folk. And so both James Cameron and Quentin Tarantino take delight in thumbing their noses at authority and showing in both of these films how to elicit sympathy for people of color, be they black or blue, but also they did something that you rarely see in Hollywood films. They showed people of color outsmarting, defeating, and killing white folk. You don't see that very often. So that means that these films have a very special story to tell. So Quentin Tarantino has a reputation for films that contain an almost video game type of violence. I mean, the violence is over the top. If you all seen Kill Bill, I mean, the violence is just over the top. And it's done to appease his target audience. But in Django Unchained, Quentin Tarantino actually stepped back and toned down the violence. Because he screened the film before focus groups, before he edited the final production. And what he saw was that people reacted negatively, the audience reacted negatively in the scenes where the two Mandingos were fighting. They reacted negatively in the scene where D'Artagnan, the captured runaway slave, was attacked and killed by dogs. So what he decided to do was to strategically edit those scenes to just give you a glimpse of the violence. He didn't fixate on it like he did in his other films. He just gave you a glimpse so that when you saw these men fighting each other, when you saw the dogs attacking D'Artagnan, you didn't have to see every single detail to know in your mind emotionally what was going on, what was happening to those people. So that was a strategic move in order to not alienate the audience. And one of the other things that he did that was very strategic was to space out the violence and intersperse comedy. Why? Because comedy has a way of leveling the playing field. Comedy has a way of making people feel at ease. And so one of the most comical scenes in the film is a scene where the proto-Ku Klux Klansmen are doing their thing. Now, that offended a whole lot of folk because of who the Klans were, but he wrote that scene in order to insert a little humor, but to also show how stupid these people were. And you don't normally see these types of terrorists presented as ignorant folk. But that was his whole idea, to show you that these are just some stupid, dumbass crackers. And that should be the takeaway from that scene, all right? So then, the reality is, if you look at Quentin Tarantino and who he is as a filmmaker, he's a phenomenal person with a deep and broad understanding of film history. And what he does in all of his films is to pay homage to some of his favorite writers and favorite directors of the 60s and the 70s. So my favorite Quentin Tarantino film is Pulp Fiction. It's 20 years old. It's a brilliant film. I mean, it's well written. It's a smart film. The violence is off the chain, but the film made a star out of Samuel Jackson. Won some Academy Awards and made him a person to be reckoned with in Hollywood. As a matter of fact, did you all know that Sam Jackson has starred in more films in Hollywood than any actor in Hollywood history? Samuel L. Jackson. Did you all know that Samuel Jackson, the films that he's been in, has made more money than any actor in Hollywood history? Now, Spike Lee may have been responsible for introducing us to Sam Jackson, but Quentin Tarantino is the person who made him a star and made him bankable, right? And Samuel Jackson steals every single scene that he's in Pulp Fiction. I mean, he's a brilliant actor. I mean, really brilliant actor. The other thing with Quentin Tarantino is that he's been criticized, rightfully so, for the excessive use of the word nigger in his films. And there's a piece that I found online the other day that does the N-word count in Quentin Tarantino's films. So in his first film, Reservoir Dogs, it was used 5 times. In Pulp Fiction, it was used 16 times. In Jackie Brown, it was used 39 times. And in Django Unchained, I stopped counting at 110, right? Spike Lee has said, there's a comment here with Spike Lee, Quentin is infatuated with that word. What does he want to be, an honorary black man? But if you listen to Quentin tell his story, Quentin tells this story, and there's a quote up here. He says, at different points in my life, I was raised by black people. I was raised in black homes. He grew up in a predominantly black community, went to an all-black high school. So he's lived around black folk most of his life, throughout his childhood, throughout his early adulthood. So growing up around black folk, he was used to hearing us use that word all the time. So unfortunately, it comes natural to him. That doesn't excuse him using it, but it comes natural to him. So that word, what we need to understand, what we need to deal with is that word, the use of that word, and black folk criticizing Quentin Tarantino for using that word, I think is hypocritical. Because he shouldn't be the only person who's criticized for using that word. Anybody who uses that word should be criticized and held accountable. So my position is, if you know our history, and if you know the history of that vile and evil word, nigger, and that it dredges up memories of a sick, twisted history of Africans in America from slavery times to this present day. So if you understand that the sickness associated, the pain associated with that word, then any person in their right mind would say nobody should be using that word. Not Quentin Tarantino, not Jay-Z, not Kanye, not 50 Cent, not Poop Doggy Dog, or anybody should be using that word. So if we held them accountable, then we would be wholly justified in saying, Quentin, that's a no-no. Right? So what it does is hold a mirror up to us and say that we need to do better on this account. And this is an issue that many folk in our community have been talking about for decades, but it doesn't get the attention that it should. Again, understand what I said earlier about how your brain functions. What you hear frequently becomes your reality. So if you know that, and if you care about yourself, if you care about your people, then you would invest your energy in doing whatever you can to minimize any negative words coming into the consciousness of your people, especially young, impressionable black folk who don't know any better. So this is a fight that we have to deal with, but that's another lecture. I'm not here to talk about that tonight. The idea for writing Django Unchained came from a conversation over a dozen years ago, a conversation between Reginald Hudlin. The Hudlin brothers have done a host of films, House Party and Boomerang, a conversation between the Hudlin brothers and Quentin Tarantino. So the idea that what came out of this conversation is that both of these young men were talking about roots and the shortcomings of roots. And the fact that given an opportunity, once Chicken George in the original 1970s television program Roots, once Chicken George was given his freedom and given the opportunity to whip the man who had abused him, he took the high road and decided that he wasn't going to do that. And both of them said, that's BS. You know, now why, why is it when black folk are given an opportunity to get back at the person who imposed so much pain and punishment on them, they always take the high road? When in reality, come on now. So Quentin Tarantino, that's stuck in his craw. So he wanted to deal with that issue. And so he said about a decade later, one of the other things that he wanted to do was to do a Western, because he grew up watching a lot of Westerns from the 60s, especially spaghetti Westerns. You know, he's a lover of spaghetti Westerns, those Italian cowboy films. And so he decided that he was going to write a Western. You know, he decided he was going to write a Western, but then because the period of Western cowboy movies also coincides with slavery. So he decided to mix these two genres. And then that led to Django Unchained. So he shared the script with Reginald Hudlin. Hudlin read the script and said, man, this is dynamite. I want to get in on it. So Hudlin served as one of the executive producers of Django Unchained. Right? And they shopped the script around to a number of people. And there's a piece circulating on the internet that his first choice for Django was Will Smith. And Django read the script, thought it was a powerful script, but he felt that Django was a secondary character. And Will said, I want to be the primary character. I don't want to be the secondary character. And unfortunately, Will didn't really understand. He didn't see the bigger picture. He didn't see the bigger picture. So Jamie Foxx wound up getting the lead in the film, and the rest is, as they say, history. And so what Quentin Tarantino did is something that was never done before. He then did a spaghetti Western that was set in the Deep South during slavery, and he made a hero out of an enslaved African. So he combined these two genres to tell a story for the big screen, a story that had never been told before. So the reality is that even though Django Unchained is a work of fiction, a piece of entertainment that was written to make money, some people didn't see it that way. They couldn't get past the obvious racial undertones in the film. So the reality is that if that's what you're looking for, the racism in the film, you're going to find it. Because you bring yourself, you bring your consciousness into the movie theater with you. And you project your consciousness onto what you see. You filter it through that lens. So if you're looking for it, you're going to see it, and there's a lot of it in Django. But the reality is that you've got to look past the obvious. And if you do that with this film, what you'll see is a multi-layered film with very powerful messages that are obscured if your mind is focused solely on racism. So I'm not suggesting for a minute that you forget about racism and that it exists. As a black person, you can't do that. That's impossible. But what I'm suggesting here is that you check it for a minute and you don't allow the ugliness of racism that we're confronted with all of our lives, you don't allow that to obscure other realities that are also there waiting to be seen if you approach it with the right mindset, if you approach it with a finely tuned eye. So with a different mindset, you can walk out of that theater seeing an entirely different film, getting an entirely different message, and that's what I'm going to focus on tonight. So make no mistake about it, Django Unchained is a rare Hollywood movie with a black hero. You don't find that very often in Hollywood. But understand very clearly that the film was produced by white people for white people. It has been nominated for many awards, and it's won many of those awards. So if you think about it, Christoph Waltz and Leonardo DiCaprio were both nominated for Best Supporting Actor. And they're dynamite actors, wonderful actors. And they did a wonderful job in this film. They both gave outstanding performances, and individually, these two men have more lines in the film than any other black people, than all of the black people in the film combined, with the possible exception of Sam Jackson and his character, Stephen, all right? So when you think about Sam Jackson's role as Stephen, now his role was right on up there. It was on par with Christoph Waltz and Leonardo DiCaprio, but he wasn't nominated for Best Supporting Actor. And that says something about the racism that still exists within Hollywood. The other reality is that neither Jamie Foxx nor Kerry Washington can honestly be nominated for Best Actor or Best Actress because their speaking roles were nominal. They were nominal. As a matter of fact, during the recent 85th Annual Academy Awards show in February, Christoph Waltz did win an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, Django Unchained, and Quentin Tarantino won an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. So Hollywood got it right in this instance in that they gave the right awards to the right people for doing an outstanding job in this particular movie. So let's just look at the dollars and cents aspects, the business aspect of Django Unchained for a minute. Django Unchained cost $100 million to make. But this movie is made in the 15 weeks that it's been out. It has grossed domestically $162.5 million in U.S. theaters. And the reality is, black folk in the U.S. only constituted 30% of the movie-going audience, which means that 70% of the people who paid to see this movie didn't look like us. White folk, Hispanics, Asians spent more money to see this film, got more money out of this film than we did. See, I told you this film wasn't written for us. It's written for the larger audience, the larger film community. Overseas, this movie, Django Unchained, has made $256 million overseas. And the vast majority of people who saw this movie overseas were white folk, not black folk. So what that means then, what that tells us, is that the total box office receipts for Django Unchained is $419 million. This is Quentin Tarantino's biggest selling